good morning, good afternoon, good evening, good people. My name is Martin Iboragewa Moreidi, and on this auspicious day, auspicious day, I'm coming to you to read the final two chapters of Niccolo Machiavelli's The Prince. And I want to talk about, before I read the last few chapters, I want to talk about like one of my weaknesses, I guess I would call it, is I take too long to finish a book, especially a good book, because then I have to finish that book and then there's the suspense of, will I find another good book, like another book that's as good as it? And I usually do, almost always. And this time it was the same. I didn't want to make this video, but the more I didn't want to make it, the more I knew I should make it. So I hope you all enjoy. Chapter 25 is called The Role of Luck in Human Affairs and How to Defend Against It. I realize that many people have believed and still do believe that the world is run by God and by fortune, and that however shrewd men may be, they can't do anything about it and have no way of protecting themselves. As a result, they may decide that it's hardly worth making an effort and just leave events to chance. This attitude is more prevalent these days as a result of the huge changes we've witnessed and are still witnessing every day. Things that no one could have predicted. Sometimes, thinking it over, I have leaned a bit that way myself. All the same, and so not to give up on our free will. I will reckon it may be true that luck decides the half of what we do, but it leaves the other half more or less to us. It's like one of those raging rivers that sometimes rise and flood the plain, tearing down trees and buildings, dragging soil from one place and dumping it into another. Everybody runs for safety. No one can resist the rush. There's no way you can stop it. Still, the fact that a river is like this doesn't prevent us from preparing for trouble when levels are low, building banks and dikes. So when the water rises the next time, it can be contained in a single channel, and the rush of the river in a flood is not so uncontrolled and destructive. Fortune's the same. It shows its power when no one has taken steps to contain it, flooding into places where it finds neither banks nor dikes that can hold it back. And if you look at Italy, which has borne with, which has been both the scene of revolutionary changes and the agent that set them in motion, you'll see it's a land that has neither banks nor dikes to protect it. Had the country been properly protected, like Germany, Spain, and France, either the flood wouldn't have had such drastic effects or it wouldn't have happened at all. I think that is I think that is all that need be said in general terms about how to deal with the problem of luck. Going into detail, though, we've all seen how a ruler may be doing well one day and then lose power the next without any apparent change in his character or qualities. I believe this is mostly due to the attitude I mentioned above. That is, the ruler trusts entirely to luck and collapses when it changes. I'm also convinced that the successful ruler is the one who adapts to changing times, while the leader who fails does so because his approach is out of step with circumstances. All men want glory and wealth, but they set out to achieve those goals in different ways. Some are cautious, others impulsive. Some use violence, others finesse. Some are patient, others quite the opposite. All these different approaches can be successful. It's also true that two men can both be cautious, but with different results. One is successful and the other one fails. Or again, you see two men being equally successful, but with different approaches. One is cautious, the other one impulsive. This depends entirely on whether the approach suits the circumstances, which in turn is why, as I said, two men with different approaches may both succeed, while of two with the same approach, one may succeed and the other not. This explains why people's fortunes go up and down. If someone is behaving cautiously and patiently, and the times and circumstances are such that the approach works, he'll be successful. But if times and circumstances change, everything goes wrong for him because he hasn't changed with his approach too much. You won't find anyone shrewd enough to adapt his character like this, in part because you can alter your natural bias, and in part because if a person has always been successful with a particular approach, he won't be easily persuaded to drop it. So, when the time comes for the cautious man to act impulsively, he can't, and he comes unstuck. If he did change personality in line with times and circumstances, his luck would hold steady. Pope Julius II always acted impulsively and lived in times and circumstances so well suited to his approach that things went well for him. Think of this. Think of his first achievement, taking Bologna, while Giovanni Bentivoglio was still alive. The Venetians were against the idea, the King of Spain likewise, and Julius was still negotiating the matter with the French. All the same, with his usual ferocity and impetuousness, the Pope set out and led the expedition himself. This put the Venetians and the Spanish in a quandary. They were unable to react, the Venetians out of fear, and the Spanish because they hoped to recover the whole of the kingdom of Naples. Meanwhile, the King of France was brought on board. He needed Rome as an ally to check the Venetians and decided that once Julius had made his move, he couldn't deny his army. He couldn't deny him armed support without too obviously slighting him. With this impulsive decision, then, Julius achieved more than any other pope with all the good sense in the world would ever have achieved. Had he waited to have everything arranged and negotiated before leaving Rome, as any other pope would have done, the plan would have never have worked. The plan would never have worked. The King of France would have come up with endless excuses, and the Venetians and Spanish with endless warnings. I don't want to go into Julius's other campaigns, which were all kind and all successful. Because if times had changed and circumstances demanded caution, he would have been finished. The man would never have changed his ways because they were natural to him. To conclude then, Fortune varies, but men go on regardless. When their approach suits the times, they're successful. And when it doesn't, they're not. My opinion on the matter is this: it's better to be impulsive than cautious. Fortune is female, and if you want to stay on top of her, you have to slap and thrust. You'll see she's more likely to yield that way than to men who go about her coldly. And being a woman, she likes her men young because they're not so cagey. They're wilder and more daring when they master her. Chapter 26: An appeal to conquer Italy and free it from foreign occupation. Go back over everything I've said. I've been asking myself whether the time is right in Italy now for a new ruler, whether there's a sort of material available here that will give a shrewd man with the right qualities the chance to impose some form, winning honor for himself and doing good to the people as a whole. My impression is that a lot of things are running the way of a new man. So many, in fact, that I don't know what time was ever more right than the present. If, as I said earlier, Moses could only emerge after the people of Israel had been enslaved in Egypt, Cyrus showed his great spirit after the Persians were crushed by the Medes. Theseus proved his excellence after the Athenians were defeated and dispersed. So today, for us to witness the qualities of a great Italian, the country had to be reduced to its present state. More slave than the Jews, more crushed than the Persians, more divided than the Athenians, leaderless, lawless, beaten, plundered, broken, and overrun, ruined in every way. There was one man who showed glimpses of greatness, the kind of thing that made you think he was sent by God for the country's redemption. But then at the height of his achievements, his luck turned. So now Italy lies, half dead, waiting to see who will heal her wounds and put an end to the devastation of Lombardy, the extortionate taxation of Tuscany and Naples. Who will clean up the sores that have infested too long? You can see the country is praying, God send us someone to save her from cruelty and barbarity of these foreigners. You can see she's ready and willing to march beneath a flag, if only someone would raise one up. What I can't see in any family, what I can't see is any family the countries could. What I can't see is any family the country could put its faith in right now, if not your illustrious house, blessed as it is with fine qualities and fortune, favored by God and the church, actually running the church, in fact, and hence well placed to lead Italy to redemption. If you keep in mind the lives and achievements of the men I've written about, then the project won't be too difficult. It's true, they were rare men, remarkable men, but nevertheless they were still men, and none of them had a better opportunity than you have now. The things they did had no greater justification, nor are they any easier. God was no kinder to them than he has been to you. Justice is definitely on our side because war is just when there's no alternative, and arms are sacred when they are on your when they are your only hope. The situation is more than favorable, and when circumstances are favorable, things can't be too hard. All you have to do is take the men I've proposed as your models. What's more, God has shown us amazing, unprecedented signs. The sea parted, a cloud led the way for you, stone has gushed water, manna has rained on us from heaven. Everything has worked together to make you great. The rest is up to you. God doesn't like doing everything himself. He doesn't want to deprive us of our free will and our share of glory. It's no surprise if none of the Italians I've spoken about have been able to do what I believe your family can do. Or again, if all your recent wars and revolutions have given the impression that the country has lost its capacity to fight. This is because the old states were badly organized and no one knew how to improve things. Nothing brings more honor to a new ruler than the new laws and institutions he introduces. When they are well thought out and show vision, they bring a ruler respect and admiration. Italy is hardly lacking in raw material for the man who wants to give form to it. The limbs are healthy and strong. All they need is a heady guide to them. Look how much stronger, defter, and more skillful Italians are than foreigners in duels or small skirmishes. But when it comes to armies, they can't compete because they are badly led. The capable men are ignored. The incapable are convinced they are capable. And to date, no one has had the talent and luck to score the sort of success that would force the others to stand aside. That's why in all these wars over the past 20 years, whenever an army has been entirely made up of Italians, it has always failed miserably. As witness the first battle of Taro, then of Alessandria, Capua, Genova, Vaila, Bologna, Mestre. So, if your illustrious family should choose to follow in the steps of those excellent men who came to the rescue of their peoples, the first thing that needs to be done, the real foundation of any achievement, is to establish an army of your own citizens. You can't have more loyal, determined, and better soldiers than your own. And if each man taken singly is good, then they're all together and find themselves led, fed, and respected by their own ruler, they'll even be better. Founding an army like this is absolutely essential if we are to use Italian metal to defend ourselves against foreign enemies. It's true that the Swiss and the Spanish infantries are thought to be formidable, but both have weak points that allow a third force not only to face them, but to feel confident of beating them. The Spanish can't stand up to cavalry, and the Swiss are in trouble when they run into infantry as determined as themselves. That's why, as we've seen and will see again, the Spanish can't turn back a French cavalry attack, and the Swiss collapse in front of a Spanish style infantry. And although we haven't had complete proof of this Swiss vulnerability, we got a glimpse of it at the Battle of Ravenna, when the Spanish infantry took on the Germans who used the same tactics as the Swiss. Relying on their agility and the small round of shields, the Spanish got under the German pikes, where, safe themselves, they could strike at will. At this point, the Germans were helpless. If the cavalry hadn't turned up to push the Spanish back, they'd all have been killed. Knowing the weak points of these two armies, then it's quite possible to train a new army that could hold back a cavalry attack and wouldn't be unsettled by infantry combat. It's a question of what weapons you have and what new tactics you can invent. These are the kinds of developments that enhance a new ruler's reputation and bring him great prestige. It would be a great mistake, then, after all this time, to pass up the chance of rescuing Italy. Words can't express the loving welcome such a savior would get in all the towns that have suffered from this torrent of foreign invaders. The thirst for revenge, the unswerving trust, the devotion, the tears. What doors would be closed to such a man? Who would refuse to obey him? What envy could stand in his way? What Italian would not bow his knee? Everybody loathes this barbarous occupation. So, may your noble house undertake this duty with spirit and hope that inspired just causes, so that our country may be glorified under your banner, and under your protections, and under your protection, Petrarch's word be fulfilled. Virtue against fury shall take up arms and the fight be shot, for ancient valor is not dead in Italian hearts. Thank you for watching. That is Niccolo Machiavelli's The Prince